Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Talking Disney podcast. This is the show where we are reviewing the Disney canon films, and we are almost finished. After this, we only have one more, and then Encanto, and we will be done, which is pretty crazy. So I can't believe it. But we're very excited today to be here to be talking about the 1973 film Robin Hood. It's the 21st animated classic from Walt Disney Animated Studios. And I'm film critic Rachel Wagner. Stanford is here.
Hey, how's it going?
Yes, and we have very special guests today. It's so
Yay.
exciting. We have my podcasting friend, Conrado Falco's here. Conrado, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm very excited.
Yes. And the reason why I thought about Conrado for this episode is years ago, I think 2017 maybe, a long time ago, we did a underrated Disney podcast. And
Oh, yeah. Is that the first time we ever podcasted together? I think it might
was
have
one
been.
of the first. Yeah, it was a long time ago. It might have even been 2016. It was a while ago. But anyway, you had picked Robin Hood as one of your picks for underrated.
I think that checks out.
Yeah. So I thought perfect person to have come talk about Robin Hood. And so for people that don't listen to the Criterion Project, which has been on my YouTube channel from time to time, but if people don't listen to that, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. So like Rachel is saying, we host a podcast together that is not the podcast that you guys are listening to right now in your headphones or computer or whatever it is that you're listening on. We do a podcast called The Criterion Project, in which we talk about movies in the Criterion channel or collection. And we've been doing that for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of fun there. And we try to be very accessible to people who maybe feel a little intimidated by Criterion, and artsy movies. So if you are at all interested in, expanding your horizons, listening to and watching some movies that are different but exciting, I definitely recommend you give us a listen and a try.
And we've talked about a lot of animation.
That's very true. It is a podcast co-hosted by Rachel Wagner, after all. So there's a lot of animation and a lot of family-friendly movies that we talk about.
That's true. A lot of musicals, a lot of rom-coms, a lot of animation. When it's my turn to pick, I'm sorry. I like what I like. What are you going to do?
Yeah, exactly.
But we have a ton of fun. And we just, this last week, recorded our first live together in the same house episode, which was very exciting.
Yeah, very exciting, about Billy Wilder's The Apartment, which I'm pretty sure will be out by the time people are listening to this. So you should go check it out.
Definitely. It was a good one. All right. Well, we are going to talk about Robin Hood. What we like to do usually on this show is we talk a little bit about kind of our first experiences, if it's one we would have seen in the theater, about that. If it's obviously an older one like this, when we first saw it. And so, Stanford, why don't you start? What was your kind of experience with Robin Hood?
Well, you're starting with the old man here. I saw Robin Hood in the theater when I was very young, and I remember it because I loved it so much. And my parents bought me like this Robin Hood book, and I had some Robin Hood toys, and the movie is very sentimental for me in that regard. It's one of those first movies I remember seeing as a kid.
Yeah. Well, I first saw it at home with my dad loves this movie. My dad loves The Jungle Book, and he loves this. It's definitely his two favorite Disney films. And so we watched it quite a bit. And I also have a lot of nostalgia for it because of that, because it was one that my dad really liked. And so, we saw it quite a bit and quoted it quite a bit. And so I was really honestly kind of taken aback when I found out that it had this sort of bad reputation, because it had always been one I'd really enjoyed. So what about you, Conrado? What's your experience with it? You're the youngin' on this podcast.
I guess so, but my experience is kind of similar to yours. Definitely, I must have seen it for the first time either on VHS or on TV. And I was pretty young at the time, and I think I also I really liked it. I remember it being maybe not my favorite Disney movie, but definitely one that I think I saw a lot. So either it was on TV a lot, or I don't know. I just remember seeing it a lot of times, and it's definitely something that I always enjoyed. And actually, as a kid, I really liked it, but over the years, it has kind of grown on me. So maybe we can get talking about that more later
Yeah.
on.
It's interesting because it's one of those Disney films that is completely ignored by the parks. Like, unless you're really lucky, if there's like a villain night, maybe you might, or some kind of special character thing, you might see one of the characters. But for the most part, it is you will not. They pretend like this movie doesn't exist in the parks.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Have you ever seen anything Stanford in the parks?
I'm trying to think other than like some random walk around characters. No,
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. Again, as a youngster, we would have gone to Disneyland too around then. I just don't remember seeing anything other than, yeah, seems like occasionally there's a Robin Hood
Right.
character or Maid Marian or somebody walking around. Little John even, but yeah.
Yeah, because this movie was one of the first ones made after Walt's passing. He died in 1966. This came out in 1973, and at least according to the Wikipedia, the production was pretty challenging. They said that I guess that Ken Anderson, like that quote is, Ken Anderson wept when he saw how his character concepts had been processed into stereotypes for the animation on Robin Hood. Because originally he wanted it to be more of I guess there was Reynard the Fox, which was more of like a kind of like the Redwall characters or something like that, like a little more of an adventure. And then it just kind of got changed along the way. Yeah. It was evidently not going to be so silly. It says, according to Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnson, one such casualty was the concept of making the sheriff of Nottingham a goat as an artistic experiment to try different animals for a villain, only to be overruled by Reitherman, who's the director, who wanted to keep the villainous stereotype of a wolf instead. Additionally, Anderson wanted to include the Merry Men into the film, which was again overridden by Reitherman because he wanted a buddy picture reminiscent of Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. So Little John was the only merry man, who remained in the film, while Friar Tuck was put as a friend of Robin's who lived in Nottingham, and Alan Adale was turned into the narrator. Well, I don't know. What do you think, Sanford, about some of the production of this film? From what you hear, do you kind of wish that we'd gotten that original, more of a kind of an adventure? How do you think
I'm so glad you brought up those details. As a kid, I wouldn't have known the difference. As an adult, I'm curious about what it might have been. So yeah, I think I would have been very interested to see, kind of Kenny Anderson's take on it. I feel like with this rewatch, the movie's almost so safe that it's uninteresting as an adult. But still, yeah. So I'd want to see it. I'd want to see the different version, and maybe I wouldn't like it, but maybe I would.
Yeah.
My favorite is the Errol. My favorite telling of Robin Hood is that Errol Flynn film.
Yeah, it's that. I feel like that's pretty decisively the best version that they've ever done. Conrado, you also had Emperor's New Groove, I believe, on the underrated Disney episode, and I think that has sort of a similar trajectory. I think
right.
But what do you think about this? About kind of it being turned into a comedy like that? Reitherman evidently was quite insistent.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned The Emperor's New Groove, because I definitely, for that movie at the time, I'm also Peruvian. So, like Cusco is like
Mm.
very much like the whole thing is based on like Inca culture and that kind of thing. So I was really hoping at the time to get like a Peruvian version of Lion King or something. So when I got the very funny, zany movie, I was a little bit disappointed. But over the years, I have really come to
Hmm.
love Emperor's New Groove, and I just think it's so funny and
Yeah.
and fun. Whereas with Robin Hood, I think I mean, I definitely see what you guys are talking about. It's very silly. It's very much for kids, um, and that's kind of what I like about the movie. And I think
Hmm.
I don't mind it as much here, partially because there are so many versions of Robin Hood that if you want the more adventurous one, by the time I was watching movies, you already had like the Kevin Costner one and stuff.
Right.
So you could pick a different one. There's even that Russell Crowe one, which I've never seen, which I'm pretty sure it's terrible, but it's almost like watching Gladiator from what I hear.
Right.
Um, so there's plenty to pick from there. So
It's a good point.
what I really love about this movie is actually that it's such a for kids kind of thing, and we've talked about that in our podcast and Criterion Project recently, Rachel, when we talked about A Town Called Panic and how it kind of
Hmm.
uh, embodies children at play with toys. And I feel something similar about Robin Hood, about this version of Robin Hood. Maybe not so much toys, but maybe like a storybook for kids, something like that.
Hmm. Well, and I also feel like in this movie, there's a little bit. I don't have any proof that they were inspired by it, but I think there's a little bit of sort of a Monty Python esque kind of British comedy feel to it, especially the whole scene where you have the archery tournament, where you've got pies and faces, you've got things going. Who's driving
Hmm.
this flying umbrella? Kind of a thing. And I feel like I can kind of see sort of that era of '70s British humor in in this movie.
Hmm.
Hmm. But what did you think, Stanford, as on the rewatch, watching it this time? I don't know if it had been a while since you'd seen it.
It has been a little while, and I mean, I had a blast. I think
Hmm.
one of the things that I really love about it is the voice cast. Uh,
Hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I could hear Peter Ustinov all day playing Prince John. I just love it so. And Terry Thomas is great, and it's also fun to see when Andy Devine and Pat Buttram, etc. Uh, it's interesting to see again as an adult, and then having just more experience with other film genres, live action, in particular, uh, seeing how that informed the casting, and so I like
Hmm.
that, and I guess I can appreciate it. I can appreciate it more um, as an informed adult, but I also, again, that's what I loved about it as a kid too. I mean, I didn't
Hmm.
know that it was Peter Ustinov voicing Prince John, but I thought, wow, what a great
Yeah.
character and what an excellent voice,
I
that was used.
love Peter Ustinov. I completely agree. Peter Ustinov, he is so funny in any movie I've ever seen with him. Blackbeard's Ghost, he's so good. Or the Christmas one, We're No Angels. He's hilarious in that. Um, I just love him. And one interesting little tidbit. So, like I said, this is one of my dad's favorites. My dad speaks German fluently, and so he actually, I got him this movie for Christmas one year because the German audio track, Peter Ustinov does the audio in German
Oh.
Oh,
for that.
cool.
So that's kind of fun. Little tidbit.
Oh, I bet that's great.
Yeah, so you get to hear the same voices, which is fun. But what did you think of it this time on the rewatch, Conrado? Did you?
I enjoyed it because I think I have such a connection to the movie. I have a lot of nostalgia for it, and I really am actually really love this era of Disney animation, even though it's kind of maligned by some people, and some of the movies are pretty bad. But I'm talking about this time when they were kind of doing the Xerox thing, which I think starts with 101 Dalmatians, right?
That's right.
and that one, I think it's a masterpiece. To me, 101 Dalmatians is one of my very favorite Disney movies. And then there's some others that are not so good, like, Sword in the Stone is not my favorite. The Aristocats is pretty lame. But there's something about this Robin Hood that sticks with me, and I think it's because uh, of that. It reminds me of childhood in a way that, there these other movies I also saw as a kid, but this one really embodies something about children's thought and children's play, and just the fact, like, for example, when Sir Hiss gets on the balloon and then starts to fly like a helicopter, and the sound effect is just like a mouth going like,
Yeah.
I feel like that is so yeah, that is a connection that I make there, and it feels so like what you would do with your toys if you want to make one fly. You would make the sound effect with your mouth, and the fact that the music uses a lot of like what sounds to me like toy instruments and whistles and that kind of thing. It feels very much like a children's movie for children. So as an
Mhm.
adult, I found parts of it, a little maybe, I've outgrown some of it for sure. It's not a very exciting or threatening movie, right? Like Prince John is not a threatening villain. I don't think it's a funny villain, but I do appreciate that it's such a good movie for children. And when someone asks me, hey, I have my kid, I don't know what to watch, like, do you have anything to recommend? I almost always say Robin Hood because of
Mhm.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think the music does add a lot. It's very charming and very unique. I can't think of any other music aside from maybe the love song is similar to some of the others from the 70s from Disney, but I can't think of anything
Mm-hmm.
else that's so charming in that's I don't know, that's just silly and fun in this quite the same way that the music is here. And I think it goes a long way. I've always said that I kind of feel like the third act becomes a different movie, and it's a little weird to me
With
when
the castle escape.
yeah, you've been having very silly, kind of a thing, and then all of a sudden you've got every time.
Oh yeah, which is one of my favorite parts. And as a kid, I felt really sad about it, and I really
Yeah.
love the song. It's such a
Yeah, I love that
melancholy
too.
but playful
Yes,
song. Yeah.
absolutely.
One thing that was interesting, I thought this time watching, because it's interesting when you're taking notes and you're really trying to kind of nitpick a little bit, like the things that you never really even noticed before that stand out. But I never really realized how long the opening credits are and the
Yeah,
intro.
they
Oh
go
yeah.
on.
It's really long.
Yeah.
The whistle song.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I love that you bring up the toy, the toy sounding instruments, or even if they
Mm-hmm.
are just toy instruments. And it's so interesting that they, how they use, the animation at like at a different scale that you see later on in the film, just as the characters are walking back and forth in that. It's a really unusual set of opening credits. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, especially because usually we go right from the book, opening the book, like in Sleeping Beauty, and then it goes right
Mm-hmm.
to the movie. And here you got this long section of opening credits. Almost reminded me of the beginning of a musical, like My Fair Lady or something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So then we get Oodalali is the next song, and all the music was done by Roger Miller, who was a folk artist of the time. And it's really, though, I mean, I know he was very successful, but this is what I know him from. But he also wrote the music and lyrics for Big River, which is a fun show if you ever see that
Oh.
on Broadway. It's Huckleberry Finn musical. And I really like Oodalali. I think it is very charming.
Oh, I do too. Yeah.
Mhm. Oodalali, oodalali, golly. And they ask the question, are we good guys or bad guys? And
Right.
yeah, this fun dynamic. I mean, I know there is romance in this story, but I think the main relationship is the friendship between Little John and Robin Hood,
Oh
which
yeah,
I
it's a
like a
buddy
lot.
pick, as
Mhm.
as you were saying. I guess Wooly Rythron got his way, right?
Yeah.
He made this buddy pick.
Yeah. And it's also kind of a series of vignettes that are all kind of
Yeah.
strung together because there's a pretty long section in the middle where Robin Hood, you don't see him for quite a while.
when the kids are at the castle with Maid Marian and Lady Cluck. Yeah,
you've got the sheriff collecting the money, and then you've got the kids and Maid Marian. That whole section is pretty long.
Yeah, you know what it also reminds me of? That structure of having, scenes that play out in that way, like kind of vignettes. It reminds me of children's theater also, and I think that's also why I connected so much with childhood stuff, because it feels like watching a show for kids in which you have scenes. You can't move like in a movie, but you have like these vignettes, and yeah, I mean the movie, I think as far as plot is concerned, is pretty slight, and there's not a lot happens, and it's kind of pretty, you know, uh, not that high stakes, but I think it works for what it is in that way.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we should talk about, I don't know if it's the elephant in the room, but we have this recycled animation, and that's always just something kind of
that gets a lot of complaints, I think, doesn't it?
About this movie.
Yeah.
And I guess I don't really get it, to be honest. Like I don't know, like if they used it as a tool to tell the story, I don't really care as long as the story is good. I mean, I feel that way about whether you're using 2D, CG, stop motion, whatever. Like, obviously, I prefer 2D animation, but there's been terrible 2D animated films, of course. And there's amazing, you have beautiful CG animation, Spider-Verse or Wall-E or, whatever. In the end, it comes down to the story, that if the story, if the characters, then I just don't understand why people care that much, I guess. Like, I guess if you're somebody who watches movies for artistic experiences, then I guess I can see it, but I don't know. Like, to me, I've always used the analogy of like, if they reused a costume in a live action film, nobody would care. If they reused sets or props, nobody would care. Right? It's just that was where they were at as far as the budget. That's what they could do, and they reused the story. That's how I kind of feel. I just don't understand why people care so much. What do you think, Conrado?
I find the use. I think a little bit similar to you. I find the recycling of animation a little bit charming. It's almost like watching an old Edgar G. Ulmer movie, like a movie that was made under like a B movie. They didn't have money for the sets, or like an Ed Wood movie, and you watch it and you're like, yeah, clearly they only had money to build one set, that one cemetery with cardboard standing in for the tombs, and you can tell, but it has its own kind of charm. I do understand where the complaint is coming from, though. If you which I think a lot of smart people that I respect don't like this movie, and have the critique of it. The creativity feels a little off, like it's not there. Like, like, why are they animals? There's no real reason why the characters wouldn't be human. And the recycling of the animation, the design, like, Little John is not only recycled animation, but he looks exactly like Baloo. He's even voiced by Phil Harris. Yeah. So I understand. And Prince John looks a lot like Shere Khan, and obviously Sir Hiss is basically Ka. So I don't think there is a lot of. I feel like they were probably working on a budget and trying to get it out quick and stuff. But I do think that because of the nature of the movie and what I was saying about storybook and stuff, it almost even adds to it in a sense of like, almost like you got a bunch of action figures, or like, toys that are for the Jungle Book, but you're now playing out this other story.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about that, Stanford?
It doesn't really bug me. I think it's, I think it's kind of strangely charming, I guess. A way to save some money, and it doesn't really, for me, it doesn't affect my enjoyment of the film. I think what affects me more, and it was emphasized with this rewatch, as it has anytime I rewatch this film, really is more of an adult. Just all the stuff that you're talking about, it's just it's the story, and again, because I have such a sentimental attachment to it, I'm kind of, I give them a lot of leeway with it too. So it doesn't bother me, and generally it doesn't. In fact, I kind of think it's charming. Like when the end of Beauty and the Beast, how they've got that kind of high shot and
oh yeah,
and they're dancing, and it's the same animation that was used in Sleeping Beauty in the
so
in the end scene, or
yeah,
it's very similar. I thought that was kind of a cool homage.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that
But
homage.
I don't feel like that's necessarily the stuff that in Robin Hood is an homage at all. But it's like, if I save the money, what kid's gonna care,
Yeah,
and and I don't.
that's how I feel. So we start out with this fortune teller scene, and I think Peter Ustinov is really funny in this whole scene. He's like, "Female bandits, rubbish." He's like, I like that, and uh, the whole kind of Little John stealing the hubcaps and flirting with the rhinos, I think is funny. I think it's a really funny sequence, and then when you end with him, I've got a dirty thumb. I like that. Fortunes forecast, Lucky Charms. Get the dope with your horoscope. I like that. And then we have the sheriff's sequence with Otto and him getting the coins from the boot, and then you have the birthday party, which is a pretty sad, traumatic sequence for a movie for
it's
kids.
so sad. And the sheriff of Nottingham, and boy, is he established
He's
as
a
one horrible
villain.
dude,
Yeah. You definitely get the idea taxes are evil from this movie, which when I pay them every April, I agree. But yeah, when he reaches out his hand and takes I mean, he gets even worse later on when he steals from the poor box, but it's pretty intense.
I do like the about the villains, even though I feel like they're not super threatening. I do think that it's smart. They're all kind of dumb. They're all kind of laughable in their own ways, but it's also very smart of the movie to show that their actions have repercussions and how they affect the people that we do like.
Yeah.
Like in that birthday party, it's such a sad scene. And then the what we mentioned before, the Nottingham scene, two scenes that I remember a lot from being a kid, thinking how sad and feeling like, oh, this is so unfair. What these guys are doing is so horrible.
Yeah. And it's kind of it's given perspective when the mother says, "Oh, Robin Hood, you were so much to keep our hopes alive. Bless you." And
I love that, and how it fades to black, and
yeah,
there's just and the mom there crying. That's always stood out to me. I like that
yeah.
a lot.
And then we have our little kids. I don't know what the two girls are named. I just know the boys it's Toby and Skippy.
Yeah.
And
I don't know if the girls, do they establish names for them? Maybe
because
I
she
don't
just says
know.
my baby, and I don't know if we ever hear the girl's name, but it's probably in the credits somewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, the spiders, snakes, and a lizard head. If I tattle tale, I'll die till I'm dead.
They're cute. They're
Yeah.
cute little kids. Again, so sympathetically drawn, and I remember really thinking Skippy was such an appealing character in particular.
One thing they, I think, do better in Zootopia when they finally did anthropomorphize again, they keep the animals to scale in Zootopia. So
Yeah.
Judy Hopps is really little because she's a bunny, right? And here they're all sort of in and around about the same size. Especially, I mean, Lady Cluck would be a huge chicken.
Yeah. The only ones who are little are the mice. But other than that, yeah.
Yeah,
the mice, right?
Yeah.
They keep them kind of at scale. Yeah.
But I do love Lady Cluck. I think she's hilarious.
Oh, she's great. Yeah.
She's really funny. And it looks like we're surrounded. And especially when she does the whole football thing in the fighting, she's really funny. I I like her character. And she's pretending to be Prince John. Now is the time when you go off with Lady Fair. I like Toby. I'm scared of Prince John. He's cranky. But then we have this whole sequence between Robin Hood and Little John where they're talking about Marion. He's burning the chow. And climb the castle walls, sweep her off her feet, carry her off in style. And I think that's kind of a fun sequence. I know that, it's like I said about them being friends, and just that banter between the two of them, I think is really nice in that whole kind of sequence. And then when I don't know what's in that chili, but
Right.
but when Friar Tuck eats it, I always thought that was kind of funny how it looks like he's smoking, gets those bubbles.
Yeah.
Which I liked. You're no outlaw, son. Someday you'll be called a great hero. I've clearly seen this movie too many times.
Yeah.
I'm grooving on the quotes, Rach.
I don't know. What do you think, Conrado, about that whole sort of sequence with the two of them and Friar Tuck?
I think I feel like every sequence in this movie is kind of charming, and I don't know who of us said charming first time, but I remember thinking that's the perfect way to put it, and I think that's really what it comes down to with a movie like this. Is either you find it charming or you don't. I feel like the critiques of it, I understand all of them, and really my only counterpoint is that I just find it very charming. And I think it's because I have this kind of what I've been saying, like a broken record, this kind of kid thing to it that I see it and I find that very charming.
Yeah.
So I think it's all about that. If you don't, then I can see how this movie would be something that you can't sit through, even though it's completely harmless. But then again, depends on your position.
Well, so then we get the archery tournament, and we have Robin in his stork outfit. And then we get one of my favorite parts is this whole thing with Little John as the Sir Reginald, Duke of Chutney. I love that whole thing. You took the words right out of my mouth, PJ. PJ, put it on my luggage. I think that's really funny. And especially the way they're all mocking Hiss with you around, who needs a court jester? And I love all the ways in this movie that they find to insult Hiss, which makes me laugh. When they're like, an eel in snake's clothing. Long one. Move it, creepy. I like that. I think that's really funny. And I always say with a comedy, like, as long as you're making me laugh, like, that's the most important thing. Like, you're doing your job. If I'm laughing, then, I don't know. That's the most important part. I don't know. What do you think of the humor in this, Stanford?
Oh, I think it's fun. I mean, it just, I just smile throughout. And again, some of the stuff, and I've already kind of said this, but like with Terry Thomas, you're saying all the stuff, all those jokes about Sir Hiss, I think are funny. And I think they're funnier to me after seeing Terry Thomas perform in a film. It's a mad world and different things like that, which, like, yeah, I mean, he was a funny actor, and then put him in the right role too. So it all works for me for sure.
Yeah. And then we get this long slapstick sequence with them everything going to chaos at the archery tournament. And it gets pretty crazy. Who's driving this flying umbrella?
And then you said the football thing with
I love that. He's the fat one.
That's really fun.
Is hilarious. I love it. I mean, it almost, I guess part of the reason why when it just completely changes tone to me with the jailbreak, it's kind of hard because you've gone so silly. I feel like it's a little hard to all of a sudden be like, I don't know, a tragedy kind of a thing. But yeah, I think it's one of the most madcap scenes I can think of in Disney. This whole section.
Yeah, to me, it reminded me of the King Louis sequence in the Jungle Book.
Mm-hmm.
When they're breaking Mowgli out, how that just goes so kind of madcap. But I thought similar in tone, style, and pacing through that, and I like it. It's fun. It's smile.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we have the whole love sequence, the love song. This was actually nominated at the time for Best Song. I don't know. It's a little. That style of sort of 70s Karen Carpenter-ish kind of isn't my favorite, but it's fine. When I was little, I thought they had gotten married.
Oh, really?
But then at the end, I remember thinking, oh, they must have just gotten married. But they're just out for a nice romantic walk, I guess. And then we get the phony King of England, which is, I think, one of the highlights. It's also probably the most criticized because there's a lot of recycled animation in this. But what do you think of this, Conrado? This whole sequence?
I enjoy it. I mean, the music it's pretty catchy. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because the movie doesn't. Not watching it again and thinking about it with you guys. There's really not a lot of plot to the movie. There's not really that much of a story. There, like Rachel was saying, like Robin Hood is barely the main character. There's long chunks where he's not in screen, and there's long chunks when he's not doing anything, even when he's on screen. Just hanging out. So I think it all, the hangout vibe is what I get out of it as well. And I think these two sequences are also giving you that. It's kind of like just characters hanging out, like a romantic moment and then like a moment of everyone having a party. And I can see how for adults it could be maybe a little bit like, okay, what's happening in this movie? Nothing's going on. But I think for kids, it's kind of like, one emotion at a time, one moment at a time, and I think it works in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it works. I think it's funny and very catchy. So, all right, then we get this third act kind of sequence where you have Not in Nottingham, and it is a beautiful song and it's very well sung.
Yeah, it's my favorite song in the movie, I think.
Oh yeah, it's a good one. Yeah.
I'm inclined to breathe if we weren't so down. Yeah, it's a really nice song. It's just such a stark shift in tone to me, but yeah, and even the animation kind of becomes darker in these sequences with a lot more shadow and everything. And the whole scene arresting Friar Tuck is pretty like traumatic, I think, for a movie for kids.
Yeah, Friar Tuck like snaps, and
yeah.
I mean, and you can't. I can never blame him for it. It's like, oh my goodness. I mean, kind of finally, in a way, he was just like he's had it, but it is traumatic. And then when they carry him off, and the poor, mouse couple are there crying, and it's raining. Yeah,
I'll just take it for poor Prince John.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that they're basically from Jungle Book, but I do think Trigger and Nutsy are pretty fun.
Oh, the vultures, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's something funny going on.
I think they're funny too.
Yeah. I like that. And that sheriff, he's a hard sleeper. He goes out. A rock-a-bye sheriff. I mean, Robin is pretty greedy. Like, if I were him, I would just take the money that you have. But no, he's got to get the money, the bag underneath the pillow. He's got to get the one that he's sleeping with.
Yeah, he's going big. He's not messing around.
I guess Little John is also. I guess Prince John is also a very heavy sleeper.
Oh, definitely.
I also like that that Hiss, I forget where it is, but that he calls him PJ, so the nickname is stuck, which I think is funny. Even though it was from Sir Reginald.
I love how Hiss is like in that baby cradle at the end of the bed too. It's like, what in the world?
They're getting away with my gold. And then it starts to be a little bit more fun because you got this sort of chase element to it. And I also liked with the whole fire element, the you got some of those like orange and purple of the animation, kind of like what you had in Bambi, with the orange and the purples of the fire. I think that looks really good. And you get that second where you think Robin Hood is a goner, but he's not, thankfully. And again, you get more of the insults to Hiss, which makes me laugh. You cowardly cobra, you procrastinating python, you eel in snakes clothing.
Yeah, they were kind of lucky that the King Richard returned right after that, because
really I know, right?
Their plan is kind of silly, like what are they gonna do after they steal all this money from the king? Obviously, Prince John is gonna come back around and take the money back, and so they must have been counting on King Richard coming pretty soon.
Yeah, because you can't like hide everybody in Sherwood Forest.
Yeah, that's right. Because yeah. So I think that's one of those other things that make it feel like a movie with like not that much of a plot, or like I think something that a lot of people could object to about that. It's kind of the resolution feels kind of small, right? They win this small battle. It doesn't feel like they've won the war to me. But then, of course, King Richard comes back, and then everything gets resolved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You might say I have an outlaw for an in-law.
Yeah.
Because
I love that it's Peter Ustinov's voice also voicing, King Richard. Mm-hmm. I like that touch too.
Yeah. So that's Robin Hood. I think it's really fun. I had it last time in my ranking. This was 2017. I had it at 28 in my ranking.
Yeah, I had it at 26, Rach. So we're
pretty close.
Pretty close. Yeah.
Yeah, I had Make My Music at 29, and I had Atlantis, Lost Empire at 27, which I don't think would be there that high this time. But every watch is a little bit different. So
yeah,
we had some comments on our Twitter. So Richard Southworth, he says, a jolly flick, though I liked it better when I was younger than I do now. Jacob Martin says, aside from the overabundance of recycled animation, a fun and clever take on the Robin Hood story with memorable versions of classic characters, lighthearted escapism, and great songs. Matthew D. Klein says, I like how both Hood and Planet capture the spirit of their respective source materials while taking very creative liberties. Second, how could you not love the characters, comedy, and story overall? My favorite Disney film from the second Dark Age era. The Bostonian Critic says, this movie is a classic, plain and simple.
All right.
MC Myers says, it's kind of fun and admirably incorporates details from the story, but it's Reitherman's weakest film. It's the moment when exhuming animation styles from other films became obvious and pathetic. Other than that, it has a problem with keeping a compelling central thread to follow. And Nostalgia Cast, he says, it recycles too much of Disney's previous animation templates, and the score is a little too 70s kitsch. But it still captures the spirit of the Robin Hood stories I read as a kid, and the characters are fun. Passable entertainment rather than an out-and-out classic.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, my friend Alex, she says, I effing adore this one.
I saw that one.
So, there you go.
I think it's a divisive movie, huh? Not just based on the comments, but also from other people. I think there's a lot of people who think it's one of the worst Disney movies, and also a lot of people that have a lot of affection for it. And yeah, so I think
It's
that makes it an
that way.
interesting one. So, considering that it's such a, you know, like Stanford was saying, it's kind of like a safe movie. It's pretty, there's nothing like offensive about it or anything, like any like crazy things that happen, any choices in the adaptation that are like so wrong or anything like that. It's just a simple movie, and either you vibe with it or you don't.
Did you rank the canon when you reviewed it?
I'm pretty sure I did. That's a long time ago. I have no idea where to find that ranking.
Do you remember if it was in the like upper quadrant or?
I would say that it is not at the top. Like, it's not what I would consider like the pantheon of Disney movies, but it's probably right in the next level after that, in movies that I think are pretty good and that I have a lot of affection for, without calling it like a masterpiece or anything like that. I just really like it.
Yeah, I'm the same, I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah. So next time we are going to talk about Peter Pan, and that's our final classic that we have, and then we'll do Encanto, and we'll be done, and we'll hopefully figure out other things to talk about. Stanford and I never have never run out of things to talk about.
Peter Pan's an interesting movie to think about in comparison to this one. I feel like there's a lot of similarities there in terms of tone and the kind of movie that it is.
Yeah,
it's true.
The pacing, right?
Yeah.
Too is
Well, and it has
almost like a series of vignettes, as you. So well stated.
It has a lot of slapstick over the top with Hook, and the crocodile and
the crocodile. Yeah,
it gets pretty silly, which is fun. So yeah, that one will be fun to talk about. And thank you so much, Conrado, for coming on and doing this. It's really fun.
Thank you. This was so great.
Thank you, guys. It was my pleasure.
Well, where can people find you on social media and all that fun stuff?
Yeah, so people can find me on Twitter at CocoHitsNY. My website /blog is cocohitsny.wordpress.com. And most of all, you can find me on the Criterion Project with Rachel Wagner. So, that's anywhere that you listen to podcasts. So check that out.
Yeah, it's really fun. I'm really proud of it. I love our little show. So check it out. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all over social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. Check all of that out. And also check out the Hallmarkies podcast. We're going to be having a lot of fun holiday coverage coming up. So take a look at that. And you can follow us at Disney Talking if you want to comment on the films we're reviewing. We would really appreciate it. And Stanford, where can people find you?
On Twitter, I'm at Stanford Clark, and I have a movie podcast and blog at moviespastandpresent.com.
Great. Well, very good. Thank you again. And let us know your thoughts on Robin Hood in the comments section or on Twitter. We would love to chat it up with y'all. And thanks again, everybody. And we'll talk to you next time for Peter Pan. Bye, everyone.